Hey guys, what's going on? In this video, I'm going to show you how I installed a Basalite paver circle kit, and we're going to go over the process from start to finish to include ordering materials, setting up string lines to grade, using tools and equipment, and mistakes that I made so you don't make them on your own. So if you choose to do a project like this, you can be the most efficient with your time and money, and we're going to get started right now, so stay tuned. Before we get too far into this video, let me introduce myself. My name is Matt. I'm just a dude. If you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you guys watching. If you're new here, thanks for watching. If you could hit that like and subscribe button, it would help out the channel and be greatly appreciated. Thank you. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. If you choose to do anything seen on this video on your own, you assume all liability, which could result in injury or death. If you're not sure of your abilities, please hire a professional. Thank you. Also, the manufacturers and products mentioned in this video did not sponsor or pay for this video in any way. The first topic we're going to cover is ordering materials. I chose to use the Basalite Italian Renaissance Tumbled Paver Circle Kit because it was the cheapest kit I could find in my area. The kit is 11 feet in diameter, but you can purchase more pavers to make the circle as large as you want. I wanted the circle to be about 12.5 to 13 feet in diameter. I was able to order this kit from a nearby landscape material supply company, which I was able to find on Basalite's website. I was on a waiting list for 3 months in order to get one of these kits. It's 2021 and things aren't back to normal yet, I guess. If you want one of these kits, just know you probably aren't going to be able to go to the store that day and pick one up. After I ordered the kit, I also needed to order 3/4 crushed road base and sand. You should have at least 4 inches of road base. I chose to have 5.5 inches of road base. To figure out how much material I needed, I went to Google, typed in concrete yard calculator, and there are plenty of programs which will help you figure out how much road base and sand you need to order. Keep in mind, you have to order these in cubic yards if ordering from a landscape supply company. Ordering materials this way will also be cheaper in most cases than going to Home Depot. I just used the calculator, found the circle, typed in the diameter and the depth I wanted, and it told me how many cubic yards I needed. I did this with the sand as well, but you only need 1 inch for the depth with the sand. Here's my first mistake. I did not add 20% to the quantity needed when I ordered. It's better to have some materials left over than to have to stop what you're doing, drive to Home Depot, and buy sand at twice the price you could have just ordered it for. You will also need polymeric sand to finish this build, so get the price for the sand from the landscape supply company too. Just keep in mind this stuff is expensive. Order the same amount of this as you did in the regular sand. Just the polymeric sand is going to come in some kind of enclosed packaging, like a bucket or something like that, because it cannot get wet until it is set. For a couple extra dollars, the landscape supply company delivered the road base and sand to my residence. They will normally deliver it in the street or in the driveway. You just gotta let the driver know where you want it. Now, as I get older, running a wheelbarrow all day, moving sand, rock, road base, and pavers doesn't sound too appealing. So I rented some equipment to make this easier. I rented a mini skid steer, bobcat, and a vibe plate to pack the road base. The soil in my backyard is heavy clay, which sucks to dig, so I used the bobcat to dig this out too. This bobcat is pretty easy to use. It only has a few controls on it, and you should be able to figure it out with a little bit of practice in a short amount of time. And if it all goes bad and you end up taking out a fence, here's a link for a video on how to rebuild a fence and add a gate. Also, if you're going to dig anywhere, make sure you call 811 or USA North. And what that is, it's an underground utility locating company that will come out and check the area that you're going to dig and make sure there's no underground utilities that you should be aware of. Because if you end up digging and hitting something and you didn't do this, you just bought yourself a pretty big bill. Once I had all the materials and equipment at my house, it was time to start building. The first thing I had to do was mark out where the circle kit will go. I set a tape measure at 6.5 feet for the radius of a 13-foot circle. I have this curve in the concrete in my backyard and wanted the circle kit to follow the curvature in this. Once I had the outer radius set where I wanted it, I put a stake in the center and used a string cut at 6.5 feet and used marking paint to mark the outer perimeter of the circle. After I had the outer boundary of the circle kit marked, I measured from 2 cracks in the concrete slab to the stake in the center. I wrote these measurements down so I wouldn't forget them. I did this so the stake can be removed and set back in place in almost the exact same spot. You need 2 points of measurement in order to do this. Now I have the measurements to replace the stake. I pulled it out and started digging with the bobcat. I had to dig down about 9 inches from the top of the concrete. This is for the 5.5 inches of road base. 1 inch of sand, and the pavers are 2 3/8 inches tall. I dug down until I thought I got it close and then set up some string lines so I can fine tune the digging. I wanted to be careful not to over dig because I would need more base material. I wanted to follow the slope of the existing concrete patio slabs, which was tricky. The back slab against the house sloped to the yard and away from the house. The other part of the slab sloped towards the rear fence. I placed 2 stakes just on the outside of the outer marking of the circle and drove them into the ground until they were flush with the top of the concrete. Here's another tip. If you hit the tip of a nail with a hammer and make it blunt, you have less chance of splitting the wood when you drive the nail in. I don't know how this works, it just does, so I did it before I drove an 8-penny nail into the top of each of the stakes. I then put 2 corresponding stakes on the outside of the outer perimeter of the circle across from the stakes I just put in. I tied a loop into one end of some string and looped it around the nail. Make sure the nail is in the stake pretty good and bent away from the center of the circle, so when you pull the string line tight, it forces the string down on top of the stake and the nail doesn't pull out and come flying back at you. I say that because it's happened before. The other side of the string gets tied to the other stake and it gets tied tight. To do this, you just loop the string, twist it 5 times, place the loop on the stake, pull the string tight and then pull the string back on itself, and then you half hitch it a couple times to secure it. You got to tie string lines tight so they stay straight. You're building something off of them, and if they sag, it will send the whole project off. I used these string line levels to ensure the lines were level and straight. I chose to use a 1/8 inch slope for drainage. On one of the levels it has been graduated to show different slopes. I hammered the stake with the tied end on it into the ground until the level bubble sat at 1/8. Once these 2 string lines were set, I placed another string line perpendicular across the top of them, spanning the distance of the circle. This just gives another surface to measure off of. I placed this string exactly as the other 2, with a loop on one end and tied to the other. This loop will allow you to remove the string and set it aside in case you have to do something like tractor work. Once you're done, you can just put the string back on in the exact same location as before. It works out pretty good. Now the string lines are in, I measured how much I dug out, and at some places I removed too much dirt, being it was 10 inches from the string to the ground. I used a square shovel to clean up the rest of the circle and ensure it was 9 inches from the string to the ground. Now it's time to add the road base. I did this in 3 separate lifts and packed each lift for the best compaction possible. Once I had about 1.5 inches of rock in there, I put the 200-pound vibe plate in and tried to start it. The string broke on the first pull, which leads us to another tip. Always start your equipment at the rental yard before you take it home. This broke Saturday night of the Labor Day weekend, and the rental yard wasn't open again until Monday morning. I had to hand pack this lift. If you want to get some cardio in, this thing will do it. After I hand packed the lift, I put some more rock in and called it a night. The next day I fixed the pull start and the vibe plate, put some more rock into the circle, spread it around with a steel rake, and lightly watered it down to help with dust and compaction. Then I packed the rock with the vibe plate. Way easier and better than hand stamping that stuff. After this lift was packed, I put the rest of the rock into the circle. I then cut a straight 2x4 at 4 feet long and 3 1/4 inches thick. I used this board as a screed for the rock. This was the measurement I wanted for the rock under the string. I just held the board as close as I could to the bottom of the strings and screeded the high spots on the rock and added rock to where it was low. I cut the board at 1/8 inch under what I needed, so the rock was a little high, and when I compacted it, it would be close and not too far under where I wanted it. Now the rock is done, it's time to add the sand. I used 3 10-foot pieces of 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC because the outside diameter on these is exactly 1 inch. If I were to do this again, I would use steel pipe because it would not bend. The PVC kind of followed the undulations in the rock, and even though the sand looked flat, it wasn't. Once I had enough sand on the top of the PVC, I cut 1 inch off of the 2x4, nailed a stake to it on one end, and used this as a screed for the sand. Adding the stake allowed me to place one end on top of the concrete and screed the sand until it is the exact measurement I wanted to allow the stones to be placed and compacted level with the top of the existing concrete. I only added enough sand until I could place the middle stone. I did it this way because you cannot walk on top of the sand. I used the 2-point measurements which I took at the beginning of the project and found the center again and placed the middle stone. When it was time to move the PVC, I used a flat concrete trowel to add more sand and flatten it out. It's now time to start adding some stones. I got the center completed and put the string lines back to see how close it is. Looks pretty good to me. Another piece of advice, follow the manufacturer's instructions. Here are basalites. Kind of confusing, but just take it 1 or 2 stones at a time. I had to redo almost every row because I either placed in the wrong stones or placed the stones too close together. They need to be about a ½ inch apart from each other. Once I had all the stones in, I spread in a little of the polymeric sand. This is sand which will hold the stones in place once it gets wet, so don't get it wet until you're ready. Just put a little in the joints so the stones wouldn't move too much when adding the paver edge restraint. I purchased this edge restraint at Home Depot. It's made for straight lines and curves. If you want to do curves with it, you have to cut out this part to allow it to bend. I used a grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut through this. You can use a set of shears too, but a grinder with a cutoff wheel is by far the easiest way to do this. These are pretty simple to install. You just put it in place and hammer in these 10-inch stakes. To find out how much of this restraint I needed, I just multiplied 13 by 3.14 or pi and found out that I needed about 40 feet of this edge restraint. If I had to do this again, I would use concrete or permanent edge as restraint. Hammering in the stakes moved the stuff around, and it didn't really sit against the stones on a curve very well, which I don't like. After the edge restraint it was in, I added the rest of the polymeric sand. Used a push broom to sweep it around and make sure all the joints were filled. I then used a vibe plate to pack the polymeric sand and the pavers. If the vibe plate comes with a water reservoir on it for more weight, don't add water for it for this use. It will just make a big mess. The vibe plate will also pack down any high spots you might have. If there is a low spot, just remove the stones and add some sand to replace them before you get to this point. You can also do this with a hand packer, but you aren't going to be able to get out any undulations or imperfections like you can with the vibe plate. If using a hand packer, you're going to have to be more meticulous with the placing of the stones and check every stone's height to make sure they are uniform before packing. Now the stones and joints are packed, it's time to move the excess polymeric sand. The instructions said to use a leaf blower, which I didn't have, so I just swept the top with a shop broom and it turned out alright. Get as much of this stuff off the top of the stones as possible, because when it dries, it will turn like concrete on the top of these stones and then you'll have to scrape it off. Once everything is all clean, it's time to hose it off. Follow the instructions on the polymeric sand on how to install and water it down. Mine said to wet each area for 30 seconds at a time and to avoid runoff or foaming. And there it is, the finished paver circle. Now it's time to add the Rumblestone Smokeless Firepit to it. I just built it the same way I did in the video link above. Went together pretty easy, just had to move everything over. It's all ready for a fire now. What do you guys think? This was a lot of work and I completed it in about 4 days. If I took the advice that I gave during this video, I could probably have it done in about 3. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helps you out if you choose to build one of these on your own. If you have any questions or comments, please add them to the comment section below and I'll try and answer them the best I can. My name's Matt, I'm just a dude, and if I can't fix it, I'll fix it so no one else can. Thanks for watching.